There is a specific reason you are still awake right now. It is not the noise outside. It is not the list of things tomorrow is carrying. It is something heavier than that. Something that does not have a clean name. Something that lives in the space between what you know and what you can prove. Between what you feel and what you are willing to say out loud. And the reason night is when it gets loudest is because during the day you have tasks to move into. You have conversations to occupy your attention. You have the rhythm of function to keep you from sitting too long with what is underneath. But at night, the rhythm stops, the tasks clear, the conversations end, and what you have been managing around during the day moves to the center of the quiet. And if what is sitting in that center tonight involves someone close to you, someone whose face you know, whose voice is familiar, whose presence in your life you once considered safe, then you are in exactly the right place tonight, because Psalm 55 and Psalm 41 were not written for morning. They were written for this hour. The hour when the pretending is over, when the managing is exhausted, when you are finally alone. Enough to be honest about what you have been carrying. Stay with me through every word of this, because by the time we reach the prayer, something is going to shift in you. Not because I said the right words, but because God honors the person who comes to Him at night with the full weight of what they have been carrying alone during the day. What night does to what you have been holding before we open either psalm. I want you to understand something about why you are feeling it more intensely right now. The human mind is designed to process threat, and when the threat is external, clear, and nameable, the mind can locate it, calculate a response, and move toward resolution. But when the threat is close, when it wears the face of someone you trusted, when it speaks in a voice you associated with safety, the mind cannot process it through normal channels. Because the same person your mind registers as close as known as part of your interior world is simultaneously the person your discernment is flagging as the source of what you are experiencing. That internal conflict between what the relationship represents and what the pattern is revealing is what creates the specific kind of exhaustion you feel tonight. It is not just tiredness from the day, it is the accumulated weight of holding two things simultaneously that feel like they cannot both be true, but your experience keeps insisting that they are. David knew that exhaustion David wrote about. That exhaustion, and what he wrote in Psalm 55, is not a polished theological treatise. It is raw, it is honest. It is the kind of writing that only happens when someone is so tired of carrying something that they cannot make it sound better than it is. That is exactly where I want you to be as we enter these two psalms tonight. Not composed, not managing, honest. Psalm 55, the prayer of a man who cannot escape what is close. Psalm 55 opens with a cry that does not try to hide what it is. Listen to God and answer my prayer. I am overcome by my troubles. I am disturbed by the threats of my enemies and oppressed by the wicked. They bring trouble on me. They angrily oppose me. That word overcome is significant. David is not saying, I am concerned. He is not saying, I am managing this with some difficulty. He is saying, I am overwhelmed by this. The weight of what I am carrying has reached the point where my own capacity to hold it is at its limit, and in the middle of the night that is an honest place to start, not pretending you have more capacity than you do, not performing composure. You do not feel just naming the actual state you are in, because that is where the prayer begins. not where you wish you were, where you actually are. And then David says something that most people skip over quickly because it feels like a momentary aside, but it is not. It is one of the most important verses in the entire psalm. I wish I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the wilderness. He wants to run, not from danger coming from outside, not from an army, from the person close to him, from the relationship that has become something he cannot fully name or fully escape. And this is a desire I want you to give yourself permission to acknowledge tonight, because if you have been inside a pattern of close-range opposition for any length of time, you have felt this, the wish that you could simply not be where this is, that you could relocate yourself beyond the reach of what this proximity is doing to you. That is not weakness. That is a healthy human response to an unhealthy pattern. The desire to remove yourself from what is damaging you is not cowardice. It is self-awareness. The problem is that you cannot always simply leave. Sometimes the relationship is woven into your life in ways that leaving is not a clean option. Sometimes the person is embedded in a context. You share a family, a workplace, a community, a history, and so. The wings David wishes for are not always available, and he knows that, which is why he does not resolve the psalm by flying away. He resolves it by positioning himself in God's presence, which is the only territory that is truly outside the reach of what proximity-based opposition can access. Because here is what I need you to understand tonight. The person who is close to you can reach your schedule. They can reach your relationships. They can reach your plans, your reputation, your opportunities. If they know where you are vulnerable, they can reach your confidence, but they cannot reach where God has positioned you. They cannot access the foundation that God holds. They cannot touch the part of you that exists in the covering of His presence. And that is not a spiritual platitude. That is a practical distinction, because if what they can reach is your schedule and your reputation and your opportunities, and what they cannot reach is your foundation and your covering, then the most strategic thing you can do is make sure your weight is on what they cannot reach, not on what they can. That is what Psalm 55 is building toward, and we are not there yet. So stay with me. The verse that changes the entire weight of the psalm. David moves from describing what the opposition is doing to naming who the opposition is. And this is where Psalm 55 becomes something different from a general complaint. If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were rising against me, I could hide. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship at the house of God. Read that slowly again. If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. The opposition that comes from someone you never trusted is painful, but it is processable. You can name it clearly. You can position yourself clearly. You can take clear steps in response to it, because the relationship between you and the source of the opposition is clearly adversarial. There is no confusion about what you are navigating, but when the opposition comes from your companion, from your close friend, from the person with whom you once shared sweet fellowship, the confusion is the wound inside the wound, not just what they are doing, but what it means about the relationship you thought you had, about your own ability to read people, about the safety you felt in a space that was not as safe as you believed. That confusion, that disorientation that comes with discovering that the closeness was not what it appeared to be, is what sits in the center of the quiet at night, and David does not minimize it. He does not say, well, at least it is not worse than this. He does not say, God is in control, so do not be troubled by this. He names it for what it is. It is heavy. It is a specific kind of pain, and the specific kind of pain, deserves to be brought before God, with that specificity, not with generalized language, that covers it in something less honest than it is tonight. I want you to bring it specifically, not just, Lord, I am going through something hard, but Lord, this specific thing, this specific person, this specific pattern, this specific confusion that I have been living inside and cannot fully see my way through. I am bringing it to you tonight with all of its weight and all of its specificity. What Psalm 55 says about the strategy of concealment. One of the most revealing verses in Psalm 55 is this one. His speech is smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His words are more soothing than oil, yet they are drawn swords, smooth speech. Soothing words, a presentation of the relationship that reads as warm, as normal, as safe. While what is actually operating underneath that presentation is something different. This is the mechanism of proximity, based opposition, and it is what makes it so difficult to name, because the surface does not match. What you are experiencing, the words are smooth, the presentation is warm, and so when you try to articulate what you are sensing, what you have been experiencing, what the pattern looks like, when you step back and look at all of it, together you are confronted with the gap between the smooth surface and the thing underneath, and that gap is where the self-doubt lives, because you cannot easily say to yourself or anyone else, this person is opposing me. When the surface presentation of the relationship reads as the opposite of that, what David is doing in this verse is naming that exact dynamic. He is saying there is a version of opposition that operates through smooth speech, through words that sound like oil, through a presentation that feels warm and close, while something different is moving underneath it. And the reason this is in Psalm 55 is because David needed God to address not just what was visible, but what was hidden behind the smooth speech, what was operating underneath the soothing words, what the actual interior of the relationship contained that the surface was designed to obscure. God is not deceived by smooth speech. He does not evaluate the situation by the surface presentation. He sees through the oil to what the oil is covering, and what he sees, he addresses. You do not need to prove it. You do not need to build a case that is persuasive enough to overcome the smooth presentation. You need to bring it to the one who cannot be deceived by the presentation, and trust that his sight operates where your sight is limited, by the disguise. Now this is the verse that everything in Psalm 55 builds toward. As for me, I call to God, and the Lord saves me. Evening, morning, and noon, I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. He does not pray. Once he does not bring the situation, once to God, and then step back and wait. Evening, morning, and noon, 3 times a day. The same posture, the same consistent return to the same place, because the strategy is not the prayer in isolation. The strategy is the posture. The prayer maintains when you return consistently to God's presence with what you are carrying. You are not returning because the situation has not changed. You are returning because the return itself is the positioning, the deliberate daily act of bringing the weight back to God, rather than allowing it to accumulate as unprocessed heaviness in the space between your ribs, where it lives when you try to carry it alone. That posture is what we are establishing tonight, because tonight is when it is heaviest. Tonight, when the quiet brings what the day kept in the background, forward into the center, and the response to that is not to fight it back down, not to manage it, back into the background, not to find enough distraction to get to morning without sitting with it. The response is to bring it to God, here in the dark before morning comes, because this is when the full weight of it is available to be placed before Him, and He receives it at night, just as completely as He receives it in the day. Psalm 41, the psalm that names what you cannot fully say. Now let us move into Psalm 41, and I want you to understand something about why these two psalms belong together, especially at night. Psalm 55 is the external voice. It is David describing what he is navigating: the opposition, the confusion, the pain of betrayal by proximity, the desire to flee, the decision to stay and call to God instead. Psalm 41 is the interior voice. It is David describing what the experience is doing inside of him, not just what is happening to him, but what it is producing in him and at night. That interior voice is the one that gets the loudest psalm. 41 begins with a declaration that seems almost too peaceful for a psalm that is about betrayal. Blessed are those who have regard for the weak. The Lord delivers them in times of trouble. The Lord protects and preserves them. They are counted among the blessed in the land. He does not give them over to the desire of their foes. David starts not with the wound, but with the nature of the person who is inside the wound. Those who have regard for the weak, those who pay attention to the vulnerable, those who operate with care toward what is fragile. He is describing a posture, and he is saying that the person who holds that posture is the person God protects and preserves when the trouble comes. And tonight, I want you to ask yourself, honestly, has that been your posture? Not perfectly, not without failure, but in general, has that been the direction of how you have moved through life, with some regard for what is fragile, with some care for what is vulnerable, with some attention to what needs to be handled carefully? If yes, then this psalm's opening declaration is speaking directly to you. Tonight, not as a reward for good behavior, but as a covenant reality about the kind of person. God positions Himself near the kind of posture He honors with His presence when the opposition arrives, and the opposition described in Psalm 41 is specific. It is the opposition that comes with language, with words, with narrative. They speak from their hearts. They gather together to whisper against me. They plot my harm, saying a vile disease has beset him. He will never get up from the place where he lies. Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me. The whispering, the gathering, the narrative being constructed about you in spaces you are not in by people who have access to what makes the narrative believable, because that is the specific capability that proximity provides, not just the ability to oppose you, but the ability to shape how others understand you. Because the person who is close has information, and information in the wrong hands becomes narrative, and narrative, once it is in circulation, is much harder to address than a direct opposition would be, because you cannot always see what is being said in the spaces you are not in by people who sound credible because of how close they are. That is what most people who identify with Psalm 41 verse 9 are actually navigating: not a single dramatic betrayal with a clear moment and a clear turning point, but a slow campaign. A series of small things, whispers that shift, perceptions, conversations that reframe who you are. narratives built carefully from the inside information that only closeness provides, and the weight of that is that you do not always know where it has gone, what has been said, who has been reached, what version of you is circulating in spaces you cannot see. And at night that uncertainty is what sits in the quiet and grows the verse that holds everything, but here is where. Psalm 41 does something that Psalm 55 builds up to, but does not fully say. Verse 11 and 12. I know that you are pleased with me, for my enemy does not triumph over me. In my integrity you uphold me and set me in your presence forever. 2 words, integrity and presence. David's confidence is not based on the opposition. Failing it is not based on the narrative being corrected. It is not based on the whispers being silenced or the relationships being restored, or any external outcome. Changing it is based on integrity, his consistent alignment with what is actually true, his refusal to compromise his own conduct because of what is happening around him, his maintenance of who he actually is, regardless of what version of him is circulating in spaces he cannot control, and it is based on presence. His access to God's presence, which is the only territory that the whispering cannot reach, the only space where the narrative does not have authority, the only ground that holds regardless of what has been said in rooms. He was not in tonight. I want you to hear this as a word that is specifically for you. Your integrity is your position, not your performance of innocence, not your ability to prove what has been operating your actual integrity, the real record of who you have been in this situation. You have conducted yourself, what you have done and not done, what you have said and not said, what you have chosen, and what you have refused. That record is seen in its entirety by God, and He does not evaluate it through the lens of the narrative that is circulating. He evaluates it through what is actually true, and what is actually true does not need your help to remain true. It just needs time to become fully visible and your access to God's presence, which is what the prayer we are about to enter together is establishing, is the ground that holds you while the truth is becoming fully visible. That is not passivity. That is the most precise and powerful posture available to you, because it positions you on ground that cannot be reached by what is operating from close range. What night is actually for. Before we enter the prayer, I want to say one more thing about why tonight matters in most situations of proximity-based opposition. The tendency during the day is to manage to function as normally as possible to keep the weight below the surface, where it does not disrupt the rhythm of life, and that is not wrong. There is wisdom in maintaining function while you are navigating something you cannot always fully stop and process in the middle of the day. But the cost of consistent management without release is accumulation. The weight that is managed down during the day does not disappear. It waits, and night is when it presents its full accumulated weight. And what I want you to understand about tonight is that the full weight being present is not a problem to overcome. It is an opportunity to bring everything to God. Not the managed version, not the filtered version, not the version that is still holding some things back because there is a part of you that has not yet decided it is safe to be that honest. The full weight, all of it. The parts that feel too big to say. The questions you are afraid to ask because of what the answer might mean. The grief about what the relationship actually was, the confusion about what is true and what is distorted by your own weariness. The anger that you have been managing down because anger does not feel like a holy response. All of it, bring it to God tonight in the dark. Because He handles full weight better than He handles managed presentations, and because the night is when the weight is fully available, which means tonight is when the fullest prayer is possible. The prayer, let us pray together. Now, Father, it is night, and the weight that the day kept in the background has moved to the center, where I can no longer manage it around. I am not coming to you with a composed version of what I am carrying. I am coming to you with the actual version, the full weight of it. The parts I have been afraid to fully acknowledge, even to myself, I come to you. The way David came to you in Psalm 55, overwhelmed, not performing capacity. I do not have honest about where my own resources end and where I need yours to begin. Tonight I bring before you what is sitting in the center of the quiet. Someone who knows me from the inside. Someone with whom I shared something. Real something that felt like it was mutual. Something that I invested in with genuine trust, and something has shifted or was never what it appeared to be, or is shifting gradually in ways I cannot fully trace to a single moment or a single cause. But the accumulation of what I have been experiencing in proximity to this person, in the shadow of this relationship, has become a weight. I cannot carry through one more night without placing it before you. I bring it specifically. Lord, not with vague language that keeps the real thing at a comfortable distance, but with the specificity of what I am actually carrying. I bring the confusion, the disorientation that comes from sensing a pattern, that the surface of the relationship does not clearly show the second-guessing of my own perception, the replaying of conversations and moments looking for confirmation of what I am sensing or looking for the thing that will explain it away. Because part of me would rather be wrong about this than be right. I bring the grief because what I am navigating is not just an opposition. It is a loss, the loss of what I believed. The relationship was the loss of the safety I felt in the closeness, the loss of knowing where I stand with someone I once thought I knew clearly. I bring the exhaustion, the specific tiredness that comes from holding these two things simultaneously, what the relationship represents and what the pattern is revealing. That tension is wearing, and I am tired in the way that sleep alone does not fix. I bring the anger that I have not always given myself permission to feel, because anger does not feel like the appropriate response for someone who is trying to handle this well. But it is there, and I am bringing it to you, rather than suppressing it, because you can do more with my honest anger than you can with my managed composure. And I bring before you what I cannot see, what has been said in spaces I was not in, what has been whispered in the pattern. That Psalm 41 describes what narrative has been constructed from the inside information, that only closeness provides what perception of me has been shaped by someone who knows exactly which details to select and which to omit to build the version of the story that serves their position. I cannot see all of that, Lord. I am inside the dynamic and the dynamic limits, what I can see from within it. But you are not inside the dynamic. You are above it, outside it, watching it from a vantage point that is not limited by my proximity to what is happening. You see what was said in the room I was not in. You hear what was whispered about me in the conversation that did not include me. You see the full shape of what is operating, not in fragments, as I see it, but completely. And what you see you address before I ask you to address what is operating against me. I pause here as David paused in Psalm 7, and I open my own record for examination. If I have misread something, Lord, show me. If my own wounds or fears or past experiences have colored what I am perceiving in this situation, in ways that do not accurately reflect what is actually there, bring that to light. I want to see clearly, which means I want to see myself clearly first. If I have contributed to what I am experiencing in ways I have not been willing to fully acknowledge, show me. I am not here to build a case. I am here to stand before you in truth, and truth includes what is true about me, not only what is true about what others have done. Examine me in this moment, and whatever you find that needs correcting in me, bring it. I trust you enough to receive correction. Even tonight when I am tired, even in this vulnerable moment, because I would rather stand before you corrected and clear than stand before you unexamined and convinced of my own complete innocence. And after that examination, after whatever correction you bring, I ask for the clarity that comes from your sight applied to this situation. Lord, clear the confusion, not by removing the situation, but by giving me the clarity to see it accurately from the inside. Let me know what is actually there, what is actually operating, what the pattern is actually serving, who in my life is genuinely aligned with me, and who is not blanket suspicion that collapses into distrust of everyone. Close, that is not clarity. That is fear, and fear is not what I am positioning myself in tonight. Specific, accurate wisdom, the kind that only comes from you, that allows me to see each relationship in my life with the accuracy it deserves, neither naively open where careful distance is appropriate, nor defensively closed where genuine trust is warranted. Give me eyes that see what is actually there, and the wisdom to know what to do with what I see. I ask tonight for what Psalm 55 points toward, not the wings of a dove to fly away from this, though I will be honest and say part of me wants that, but the steadiness to remain positioned in your presence while this season does what it is doing, because I cannot always leave, yet not always remove myself from the proximity of what is working against me. Sometimes the relationship is woven into my life in ways that require me to remain present even while being wise. So I am not asking for escape. I am asking for the positioning that Psalm 55 describes. Evening and morning and noon, I call to you, and you hear me. Let that be my strategy in this season. Not investigation, not confrontation, not retaliation. Consistent return to your presence as the primary move. I make every day, including the days when nothing visible has changed. I ask for the protection that Psalm 41 promises to the one who has maintained a posture of care and regard for what is fragile. Lord, you see my record. You see how I have moved through this, what I have chosen, and what I have refused, where I have maintained my integrity, even when it would have been easier not to, where I have kept silent when speaking would have felt satisfying, but would not have been wise, where I have extended grace. That was not deserved, because I was unwilling to become what I was navigating. You see that record in its entirety, and I trust that the record does not need me to defend it. You are a sufficient witness to what has actually happened. I ask for the vindication that Psalm 41 describes, not the vindication of my preference, not the specific outcome. I have been privately hoping for not the version of resolution that satisfies my grievance. The vindication of truth, whatever truth needs to emerge about this situation, about what has actually been operating, about what I have actually been in this situation. about what the relationship actually contains. Let it emerge in your timing, not mine, because I know that my timing is informed by my impatience, and your timing is informed by your complete view of everything relevant to the situation. Let it emerge in your way, not mine, because the way I would engineer its emergence if I were operating from my own impulse would probably expose me further rather than protect me. I release my grip on how this resolves, and I trust that what you require for resolution will be just and complete and appropriate to what you see tonight, specifically in this dark space, in this quiet that has been carrying this weight. I ask for sleep that is not haunted by what I cannot resolve, because I have placed what I cannot resolve before the one who can resolve it. I ask that what has been sitting in the center of the quiet would move from my chest into your hands, not because the situation is resolved, but because I have done the most important thing available to me. I have brought it to you, and I ask that tomorrow morning, when I open my eyes, I would feel the difference, not necessarily in the situation, but in the weight and the degree to which I am carrying it alone. Because after tonight I am not carrying it alone. What is true about this situation is visible to you in its entirety. What has been concealed in closeness is exposed in your sight. What has operated in the hidden space of a familiar proximity has no hiddenness in your presence. I trust you with all of it. The parts I can see and the parts I cannot. In Jesus' name, amen. Declarations for the night. Receive each one of these. Let it settle before you move to the next. The confusion I have been living inside is not my permanent state. It is a season and seasons. Move my integrity is my position, not my ability to prove what has been operating against me. My actual conduct, my real record is the ground I stand on, and it holds whether anyone else can see it clearly or not. God's sight is not blocked by the smooth presentation. He sees through the familiar face to what is actually operating underneath it. What is concealed from me is visible to him, and what he sees he addresses tonight. I am not alone in what I am carrying. I brought it before God, and what is brought before God does not remain unaddressed. It may not resolve overnight, but it is no longer unaddressed. The closeness that gave them access to what can be used against me does not limit what God can see about what is actually operating. Their proximity to me does not give them proximity to my foundation, and the foundation is what holds what was operating through concealment loses something tonight because I named it before God, and what is named before God in prayer is no longer operating entirely in the dark. I do not need wings to fly away from this. Though I have wished for them, I need the consistent posture. Psalm 55 describes evening, morning, and noon. Returning to God's presence with what I am carrying, that is the strategy. And tonight, I am establishing it. Sleep is not a reward for resolving things. It is available to me tonight, because I brought what I cannot resolve to the one who can. The weight is placed. I can rest. A final word. Before you close your eyes, there is something David understood about both Psalm 55 and Psalm 41 that does not always get named in the places where these psalms are taught. He did not write them as finished testimonies. He wrote them as live prayers, prayers written in the middle of what he was navigating, before the resolution came, before the situation cleared, before the truth fully emerged. He was not writing from the other side of the valley. He was writing from inside it, and that is where you are writing from tonight. Inside it, not yet. At the other side, not yet. In the place where you can look back and explain how it resolved still in the middle, still carrying the weight, still not fully certain of everything you are navigating. And these psalms were written for this exact location inside it, in the dark at night, with the weight fully present and the resolution not yet visible. What David found from inside the valley is what these psalms are giving you tonight. Not a resolution, a posture, a positioning, a consistent place to stand from which God's presence is accessible and from which the situation can be placed into hands that are capable of handling what your hands cannot. That posture is established tonight. You brought what was heavy into the presence of God, rather than continuing to carry it alone into the dark. That choice is the beginning of what these two psalms are pointing toward. And tomorrow morning, when evening becomes morning, the first deliberate thing you do is return to that same posture. Bring it again, not because it changed, not because nothing moved, but because consistency is the strategy. Evening, morning, and noon. One of those is tonight. The others are coming. Stand firm in the night, and let God cover what the night is trying to use against you. If this prayer carried something you have been carrying alone, if these two psalms spoke to what you brought into the quiet tonight, type the word rest in the comments, not that. The situation is over, that you are releasing it to the one who does not sleep and choosing to rest in what his hands are holding. Share this with someone in your life who is still awake with something they cannot name, someone whose night is carrying what the day kept manageable. They need these psalms tonight. What was sent through proximity has met its limit. Tonight, stand firm, sleep in the covering of his presence. Authority has been exercised in Jesus' name. Amen.